Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to War Thunder History Lesson. Following suit from last week's episode, taking a look at the T-34, this week we're going to look at its big brother in the form of the Soviet KV-1. And it is a pretty tank. I fell in love with this tank in World of Tanks, as I quickly grew to respect that tank and then later learned how to take those things out with extreme efficiency. And after doing a little bit of research, I've learned the story of this beautiful tank and its development and all the backstory behind it, and I am more than happy to share with you the history of the KV-1 today. So let's go ahead and jump into some gameplay footage here, and we'll go ahead and start the story. So let's get going here. Most of these replays you're about to watch are my early battles in the KV-1. As you can see down there at the toolbar on the bottom, I don't have any modules yet. So as we progress through the video, I've gained more and more experience with the KV-1 and began to unlock more modules for the tank. The KV in KV-1 stands for Klimet Voroshilov. He was the Soviet Defense Commissar. The tank was named after him. He was appointed People's Commissar for Military and Naval Affairs and Chairman of the Revolutionary Military Council of the USSR in 1921, and he held that position through 1934. I'm going to go into some detail about this character for a minute here, because this guy has a pretty good story to him. He was responsible for moving the war industry east of the Ural Mountains, which allowed the Soviets to do the pretty much cleanse and burn tactics, were scorched earth warfare, where as they retreated east into Russia, they burnt all the farmlands, destroyed the railroads and bridges, and pretty much left nothing for the Germans to capture as they moved into Russia. He's the man responsible for that. His predecessor, Mikhail Frunze, died on the operating table undergoing surgery to treat a stomach ulcer. He died from an overdose of chloroform, which a lot of people speculated was an assassination attempt. Nevertheless, during World War II, he was a member of the State of Defense Committee. He commanded the Soviet troops during the Winter War, but unfortunately, due to his poor planning and just overall incompetence during that campaign, it led to 185,000 casualties. During a council between Stalin and his generals, Stalin began shouting at him and blaming him for the total, just pretty much disaster that was the Winter War campaign, in a pretty much unheard of response to Stalin, because as many of you probably know, Stalin was a ruthless dictator. A lot of his generals that he did not agree with or fell out of his favor, Stalin simply had killed. Voroshilov, in return to Stalin blaming him for the defeat, began shouting right back at Stalin and went so far as to smash a plate of suckling pig on the dinner table, and in turn blame Stalin for the defeat of the defeat in the Winter War, and pretty much pointed out to him that if he wouldn't have killed all of his best generals, the outcome would have been different. So he fell out of favor with Stalin. In 1941, he commanded the Leningrad front. He showed absolute amazing bravery, even so far as to rally his troops and lead them in an armored counterattack armed only with a pistol. He was replaced, though, however, following the defeats in the Leningrad front. So that's a little bit about Klimet Voroshilov, an absolute amazing character in himself, well worth having a tank named after him. This is an excellent replay right here. As you saw, I went up that hill and just completely surprised the shit out of the enemy up there, and you saw all the rounds bouncing off the KV-1, proving that it is a very reliable and well-armored heavy tank. But the KV-1 came into conception during pretty much, let's see here, don't have the time period here, but the T-35, which if you know of what that is pretty much an upgun version of the T-28. It was armed with multiple turrets, forward-facing and rear-facing. It was designed to be a breakthrough tank, but unfortunately it became a complete and total failure. So the Soviets needed a new heavy tank. They needed it to conform as well to their Soviet deep battle doctrine. Deep battle doctrine, which was a theory developed during the 1920s and 30s, was a national strategy that combined economic, cultural, and geopolitical aspects. In 1936, it was adopted and put into practice, where pretty much when the Soviets went to war, the whole country went to war. And look at all these enemies that I'm squaring off of, and notice how they're pretty much all, for the most part, as soon as that KV-1 came over the horizon, they all started backing up. KV-1 was required to be a less agile, heavy tank. It was designed to keep pressure on the enemy and fill the role of a siege tank. It was known for its very heavy armor during the early part of the war, and in battle with the Finnish during the Winter War, there wasn't a single anti-tank weapon that the Finnish could field that could damage this tank. The KV-1 did better than the SMK and the T-100, its rivals to fill the heavy tank role during that period. Its armor was highly resistant, and its gun was a multi-role, gun. It was a very well-rounded weapon at the time. However, it did run into problems when they came across bunkers. The gun was not powerful enough to deal with that, so they decided to place a 152mm cannon on the chassis of the KV-1, thus giving birth to the KV-2, which, if you've ever played World of Tanks or War Thunder, if you turn the corner and see a KV-2 pointing its gun at you, you pretty much shit yourself. that's just your only tactic to deal with a KV-2. It's just poo. And this is an interesting battle right here, KV-1 versus KV-1. I'm well versed in taking out KVs, so I know that its cheeks here up on the turret are a very vulnerable spot. But again, this gun on the KV-1 not quite capable of dealing with the frontal armor of another KV-1. The side is where you want to aim. It's 75mm of armor on the front and on the sides. If you can manage to penetrate that side armor, it's pretty much fuel tank the whole way down the hull. And then on the other side of the fuel tank, it's ammunition, and I'm targeting the fuel tank and the engine right now, trying to hold this guy in place. The way I'm positioned right now with that hill right in front of me, the only thing he can hit is my frontal plate and my turret, so he's pretty much incapable of doing any damage to me, and I'm pretty much doing no damage to him as well. Switching to high explosive right now, trying to do some damage to his turret, maybe damage some modules, damage the gun barrel, something like that. Anything I can to try and damage this sucker. Oh, no damage. Alright, let's switch back over to armor penetrating fragmentation rounds. I gotta do something to try and damage the side of this KV-1. Looks like he's got artillery. Whoa! Artillery being called in on him there. And what the hell? That guy's upside down. Crazy. So, let's talk for a minute about the pros and cons of the KV-1. The pros, unfortunately, don't outweigh the cons. The tank is a very iconic tank. It's a very well-known tank, and it is a very fearsome tank, but it does have a lot of flaws to it. It has armor that is that at the time of its first fielding on wow, nice airstrike. At the time it was first fielded in battle, its armor was invulnerable to every single current anti-tank weapon and every single current tank-mounted weapon at the time. So pretty much this thing was invulnerable unless you got up to point blank or shot it in the rear, but again at point blank. The cannon was a 76mm cannon, so it was had good all. What the hell? This is a crazy battle going on right now. It had good firepower with that 76mm cannon, very versatile. And look at that artillery coming down all around me. Soviet tank is strong tank. Your artillery cannot hurt me. It had good traction on the ground. It had very wide tracks, so it could traverse pretty much any type of terrain that you fielded it on. However, it was very difficult to steer, and its transmission was based off of a 20-year-old tractor design. So yeah, you can imagine how hard that was. There were stories that persist to this day where oftentimes you had to shift gears with a hammer. It had very limited visibility, and it had no turret basket, so the commander was pretty much standing up the whole time. Also, it weighed 45 tons, making it a very, very, very heavy tank. Even though it could traverse a lot of terrain, oftentimes it chewed up the ground, and KV-1s were pretty much not fielded at the head of any armored column because they would absolutely destroy the ground before the rest of the armored column made its way through. Being 45 tons, it affected its speed. It couldn't cross most bridges, and it had no snorkeling system, so it couldn't traverse rivers. So a lot of times it had to find its own way. This is hilarious right here. Watch this as I continue to talk. Once the T-34 made the field of battle as well, the T-34 pretty much had the same cannon the KV-1 had, so the gun on the KV-1 more or less became obsolete. However, it was unlike anything the Germans expected, and the Germans made it a point to capture a lot of them and use them. Over the course of its life, it went under a lot of different up-armored programs, and it has several different variants throughout its life. The KV-1A, KV-1E, KV-1B, and the KV-1C, as well as the KV-1S. The original KV-1 had the 76mm cannon, as you can see on this thing, and yay, I finally made it down the cliff. Note to self, don't ever try that again. Let's see, the KV-1A, which was a slightly improved version of the original model to roll off the factory, had a new gun mantlet to help support its 76mm cannon. The KV-1E had additional bolted-on armor and a new F-32 gun. The KV-1B was up-armored with 25 to 35mm plates around its turret, hull, and sides. The turret was now cast instead of welded, and the tank gun was armed with a long-barreled F-34 ZIS-76. It was armed with a long-barreled F-34 cannon. Then it was later given the ZIS-5 76mm anti-tank gun. Then there came the KV-1C with a fully cast turret, making it cheaper to produce, thicker armor, or a welded turret with thicker armor. Again, it was up-armored and used an improved engine, and it had the 76mm or the ZIS anti-tank gun. The KV-1S was a lighter variant of the KV-1. It was introduced in late 1942, giving it better speed, but it had thinner armor, a new, smaller cast turret, and a redesigned rear hull. And a new transmission was also installed, finally, replacing that aging 1920s transmission. About 1,370 of those were built. When the Germans got their hands on some of those KVs, they were redesignated the Panzerkampfwagen KV-1A 753R and the Panzerkampfwagen KV-1B 755R. 755R. The some were fitted with high-velocity 75mm guns, the same used on the Panzer IV F2. So, all in all, the KV-1 was a very successful tank throughout World War II. As you can see here, another artillery barrage coming down on me. Like, the enemy pretty much... My experience playing War Thunder is that once you see a KV-1, you start to rethink your plan. And that's, now that I'm driving a KV-1, I'm starting to see how that is. I've never had so much artillery called on me in my life playing this game. And I'm sitting here, I managed to cap C, but unfortunately pretty much every tank that can see me is calling artillery in on me. And as I'm about to deal with this T-26, just not enough time. That just about does it for this episode of War Thunder History Lesson KV-1. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to watch this video and learn something about military history. And just keep in mind, despite its flaws, the KV-1 was unlike anything the Germans expected. It was, for lack of a better term, a war winner, just like its little brother, the T-34. During battles against superior numbers and superior experienced German soldiers, the KV-1 proved successful, and in some of those battles later becoming legendary throughout World War II. It was a very fearsome tank and well respected by its enemies. So again, thank you guys for watching today's video. Please like the video down below if you liked it. Comment if you have a comment or question for me. Share with a friend and all that junk, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.